Give those who vote your spirit of wisdom and understanding. Uphold all who stand for election. Preserve their dignity and guide them in the path of integrity. Renew this nation in the honour for the stranger, respect for the different, and cherishing of diversity. When all the votes are counted, show us ways to foster the flourishing of all and be a blessing to our neighbours. In the name of Christ and in the power of your Spirit. Amen.
Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to St Mary's in Wendover. My name is Richard Williams, and I'm the chair of the central event this evening, for better or for worse. With me, I have 6 of the 7 candidates that are standing in our constituency. We're missing the Reform UK candidate, Stephanie Harwood, who hasn't actually responded to the invitation. So we have the other 6 candidates with us, and I'm going to introduce them in a minute. As I'm sure you are all aware, we're in a new constituency. So none of the candidates who we have present this evening were at our last husting for the 2019 general election. So the candidates' places here have been drawn by lot. To make it fair, it was a bit like an FA Cup rolling balls draw, and were done by the vicar, who I'm sure you will all appreciate is completely impartial. So right on my right we have Charisma Griffiths, Labour Party candidate. Next to her we have Yvonne Wilding from the Social Democratic Party. Next to me we have Anya Schaefer from the Liberal Democratic Party, Lib Dem Party. Then on my left we have Greg Smith from the Green Party. Beyond him we have Wisdom Da Costa from the Climate Party. And lastly, on my very left, we have Greg Smith from the Conservative Party. And you're all very welcome to Wendover and St Mary's this evening. Now, I'm sure it won't have escaped everybody's notice that 2 of our candidates share the same name, which was a little bit confusing for me. So to avoid any confusion, I will be referring to them as Greg Smith Conservative and Greg Smith Green, and hopefully you won't get confused. Now, before we get going, I do need to share some housekeeping items with you. First, if I call on you to ask a question, and those of you who are going to ask questions do know who you are, please wait for the microphone to arrive before you start to speak, because obviously it's very important that everybody can hear it. Even more importantly, the toilets. They're through the door to my right, and then diagonally across the first room you come to. In the event that we need to evacuate the church for any reason, and I am reliably informed by the vicar that no drill is planned, the fire exits are, firstly, obviously the main entrance you came through this evening, secondly, through the door to the right and through the side door next to the toilets, through the door at the top right of the chancel behind me, and lastly, through the vestry door at the back of the church on your right. So, a few guidelines for both you as the audience and the candidates. When our candidates speak, please show your appreciation, if you wish to appreciate the comments, through applause or laughter, or in some other positive fashion. But I would ask you not to show your displeasure by booing or heckling or any other negative action. Let's try and keep to the best levels of civility and respect, as you would expect from our fantastic community here in Wendover. Candidates have been briefed to answer questions briefly and effectively as they can. So I would ask all of you to focus on issues and not personalities, and to engage in this evening's debate in a spirit of inquiry and not conflict. And as you know, I've all asked you not to interrupt each other, so very much not a question time debate. It's not what we're about. That's enough from me. So we're going to start by asking each of our candidates to take just a couple of minutes to express to you, our audience, why they deserve your vote. We've drawn the order of speakers randomly, as you know, through the vicar, and so I'd like to ask Charisma on right down the right there to start us off. Everybody's 2 minutes, please, and I will be keeping an eye on the clock. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Charisma Griffiths, and I am the Labour Party candidate. I'm 34, soon to be 35, next week, in fact. Years of age, and I am absolutely excited and honoured that you all are out here. I am a businesswoman, if I'm being honest. I'm not a career politician. I've got a very big family, and the reason I'm sat here today is not only because of them, but many people like them. And when I say I have a big family, there's 30 plus of us, all of which have got different circumstances, but they all share the same thing. They're all suffering in one way or another. My mum's a phlebotomist with the NHS. My aunt's a teaching assistant. I have an uncle that has 2 young girls as a single parent. And I've always been in the service of people. Growing up, I played for a lot of people. I've been in plays. I don't know if you've ever seen any of my socials. I like to make people smile. And that felt good and great until I got a little bit of a higher purpose during the pandemic, where I saw there was a need to have a bit more morals in the world, a little bit more structure. And as a successful businesswoman, I was not quite sure how we had gotten to a point where we were running the country as if it wasn't thriving or how it shouldn't have been. And as somebody who has actually hit most of my targets in sales, I don't understand how others are getting rewarded for not doing a very good job. So instead of shouting at the television, I decided I was going to do something. And again, it leans into my service and my want for change. Because I want to not improve the lives of my family, but my friends, my acquaintances, and people that I haven't yet met.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. 3 simple reasons why I'd like to stand as your candidate for this constituency. Reason 1 is I'm very entrenched in this community and this society. I've lived in Buckinghamshire since 1987 with my husband Richard. We've been married for nearly 40 years. Initially living in Little Chalfont, Ashley Green, and most recently at Great Kingshill. We worship at Holy Trinity Church in Prestwood as a family. I'm a local councillor for Hewingdon Parish Council. I've been a school governor in Little Chalfont. And I've actually, for Little Chalfont, stood up and opposed a free-range chicken application, which was for thousands of chickens in the centre of the village. And I wrote a scientific opposition paper on my own, which effectively got the proposition cancelled. So I have strong commitment to securing the best for this community. On a personal level, what brings me here is my conscience. I really could not vote for any of the 3 leading parties. It felt wrong for me. They didn't jive with my values. So I looked around and I found the Social Democratic Party. And I felt for me they really represented what was important to me and I think what's good for this country. Their strapline is family, nation and community. We cannot have strong nation without building from the bottom up. So our focus is very much on helping families and building really strong, cohesive communities. Scientifically, I have a background in pharmaceutical project management. I have led drug development programs for over 40 years, which are very big, multinational projects costing £1 to £2 billion, typically 7 to 10 years duration. So I'm used to dealing with very difficult issues and bringing them to success. So that's why I'm here, and I hope this is of interest to you this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to this Hustings, and thank you all for coming and hearing what we all have to say. I'm Anja Schäfer, the Liberal Democrat candidate. I'm I'm standing in this election because I feel we need a new direction. We need more investment in public services. We need better protection of our natural environment, and we need to support people better with the cost of living crisis. I have spoken to hundreds of people over the last year, actually thousands probably, and those are the stories that are most here on the doorsteps. That doesn't count as my 2 minutes, does it? I have lived in Buckinghamshire for over 30 years. I first came here in 1992. I'm a graduate of the University of Buckingham. I am a fairly recently elected Buckinghamshire councillor. I won a by-election last year in November. I have been a town councillor for a bit longer and a town mayor, so I have a very good grassroots understanding of what matters to people and what the issues are. I drive on the same roads with the same potholes and the same delays as all of you. My friends' children go to the same school. I try to make appointments with the same GPs and the same dentists. So I know what's going on in this county. Not everything, obviously, but a lot from pretty much the bottom up. In my professional life, I'm a senior lecturer in business and management at the Open University, where I have more than 20 years experience of teaching students of all ages and all different backgrounds, vital business skills. I have a strong interest in enterprise and the natural environment, and I've published on this and supervised several students who have worked on this. So this is my area of expertise. And I also have a fair bit of management and team leadership experience. I'm a Green Liberal Democrat accredited candidate, so natural issues or the natural environment is very close to my heart. And my values are that I strongly want to see a Britain where people have access to good public services, health and care, and where every child is able to grow up without poverty and with a good education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, St Mary's, for organising this event. It's really great that we have the opportunity to meet you here. I am delighted to be standing as a Green candidate for the parliamentary elections. A bit about me, really. My work history has been in the criminal justice system. I've worked for the Prisons and Probation Service. I worked in a development role within the Ministry of Justice, and I've worked for victim-facing charities, both locally but also on a national level. And at the moment I work as a consultant in the criminal justice field. In fact, today I was in South Wales working with the South Wales Police and rushed back here just in time to spend the evening with you lovely people. So I'm glad about that. But I also have a very strong community focus as well. And over the years I've been involved in a range of projects, including I've been a school governor. I helped set up a competitive swimming club for young people in my community. I helped set up an arts festival. I'm currently the chair of an environmental charity in my area, and I'm really proud to be the chair of a group of people who got together to buy our local shop. It's now a community-owned shop. It went up for sale. There were no buyers, so we bought it, sold shares to the community. It's now a thriving business. It's never been as busy. And it's a fruit and veg shop, and people come in, they buy just what they want, they take it away in a brown paper bag. So we reduce food waste and we reduce the use of plastic. It's excellent. I'm also a parish councillor, and I'm elected member of Buckinghamshire Council as a councillor. But why you should vote Green? Well, you should vote Green, you know the reason for our stance on environment and climate change. And you know that over the last few years, all the other parties have started using the language, the words that we've been using in the Green Party for the last 50 years. But what's clear is that they don't really necessarily understand them. We want to build a better future that brings everyone together, a society that you can be proud of, you can feel comfortable in. And that means not allowing those people who are the most disadvantaged to carry the greatest weight.
Thank you. Next we have Wisdom Costa from the Climate Party.
Thank you for coming out this evening. It's great to see you all. And we stand in a very sombre moment in history, world history and British history. And we're faced by the existential threat of climate change. But climate change also presents a great opportunity. Imagine a booming Britain, booming economy, great jobs, great well-being, in clean, clear environment. Well, welcome to the Climate Party. The Climate Party are a pro-business, pro-climate, single-issue party. Now, I'm really it's interesting that at this election we are the only party who have a clear industrial plan to make the British economy grow again. No other party has that. Let me explain to you how we can do this. 92% of the world's GDP, all of those governments, are set the course to achieve net zero. This is the next great megatrend, industrial megatrend. So that's 92% of 100 trillion GDP. Now, by comparison, the British economy is only £2.2 trillion of that. Yet, £10 trillion is specifically, according to Arup, going to be coming from, or the economy is going to be coming from climate change services, from the new clean green industrial revolution. So imagine, we're 2.2 trillion, if we can lead the world in a clean industrial revolution and get a good proportion of that £10 trillion, that's going to result in a booming economy. The Britain must lead. We can lead. We've done it before. But we need to bring forward our net zero targets by decades and lead what is effectively this new clean, green industrial revolution. We need to galvanise the UK economy with a 2030 net zero target, driving investment into clean industry and manufacturing and driving exports, increasing exports from 2030s and 2040s. So getting to net zero is the next global megatrend. The British country should be leading the way with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And on my very left, we have Greg Smith from the Conservative Party.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Smith. I'm the Conservative candidate in this election. It's lovely to be back in Wendover because it's actually a bit of a homecoming for me. That when I was first elected to Parliament in the old Buckingham constituency, which is everywhere from Princess Risborough north in the county, I was living here in Wendover. My wife and I, we chose Wendover to bring up our children when we started having them. And the only reason that we had to move out was when child number 3 was on the way and we needed a bigger boat. And I'll be honest with you all, we couldn't afford Wendover either, but we very happily live in Cheersley now, which is in the constituency, where our eldest son is at a local school and our youngest 2 children are at local preschools. And just to bridge the generational divide, my parents are here too in Worminghall. Now, before I was an MP, I ran my own business. I was working in the marketing sector, working with a lot of manufacturing clients and medical technology companies for just over 15 years. But for the last 4.5 years, I've been in the House of Commons. And my way of going about politics is to stay relentlessly local, to get my elbows out for what Buckinghamshire needs, not what Westminster says Buckinghamshire should have. And I can give no better example of the way that I have done that, in that I'm going to make a very bold claim. I think I can back it up. In the past Parliament, I don't think there was anyone who was a more vociferous opponent of HS2. I got myself onto the Transport Select Committee to fight them. I have dragged their executives and their contractors' executives up here. I put them in the passenger seat of my own car to drive them round to see the mess they are creating and to try and fix it, as well as multiple rail ministers. But beyond fighting HS2, there is a much wider thing that I am passionate about for Buckinghamshire. And that is protecting our countryside, because we have lost far too much of it to development. We have lost it to housing, we have lost it to solar installations, which should be on roofs and not agricultural fields. And you will get my priority always to ensure that the development we have happens on the brownfield sites and never on our farms and our agricultural land, because we need that for food production. Beyond that, I will always stand up to ensure that you pay less tax. You are asked to take a lower burden from your paychecks or from your pensions or whatever it might be, and to ensure that we have a growing economy where, on top of our agricultural backbone, we are absolutely supporting places like the National Space Propulsion Facility at Westcott, our furniture makers in Risborough, and much wider, to ensure businesses are getting our economy growing and keeping employment as high as it is today.
Okay, that concludes the first stage. So it's time to get into some questions. And we have had a lot of excellent questions submitted. More than we could possibly deal with this evening. We've already extended this by another half an hour beyond what we did in 2019. So we've selected questions that seem best to us to represent what this community hopefully is concerned about, and which give our candidates the best possible chance to articulate their views and the views of the parties they represent. So the order of answers is going to go in rotation. When the first question is asked, I'm going to ask Charisma to start, and then we're going to go down the line. Get to question 2, Yvonne will be the first person to answer, and Charisma will be the last person to answer, and so on. So, the first question is going to be asked by me, because the person who wanted to ask it, unfortunately, last minute was unable to attend. So, I'm asking this question on Harry Hewitt's behalf. This is about party ideology. His question is as follows. Since the last election, every major party has changed leadership and therefore approach. This has meant the meaning of a vote cast for any party 5 years ago has changed. All of you sit here as representatives of a party, and if elected, you will have to vote on party lines. In order to protect Harry's vote, so it means the same thing now as it will in 2029, he wants to know about ideology, not policy. So the question is, what do you believe the core principles of your party are, i.e. what values will endure under any party leader? So Charisma, can I start you off on that?
Yeah. Wow, what a question, eh? And it's a fantastic one, because I will be completely honest. I only joined the Labour Party in 2020. There was something big going on then, which is why I decided to join a party in the first place. So I actually looked through every single one of the ethics and the policies of all the other governments other than one, and parties, and made the decision and the choice to join the Labour Party. Because as a Christian, it lined up with a lot of my views. Now, I grew up in a Labour government, and there's 14 years between me and my sister, and 10 years between me and my brother. So they have grown up pretty much in a Conservative government. And I can see that my opportunities were a lot more than what my brother and sister have, including university fees, including social clubs, including just being able to attend school. My brother, unfortunately, has learning difficulties, so the support for him versus me has been completely different. So when I joined the Labour Party, it was the ideology that we're all in this together, that we are all a community. The Labour Party introduced the likes of the living wage, which has helped numerous people. The Labour Party has brought in maternity. Labour Party has brought in so many things that have helped all of our community. So that is why I chose the Labour Party and not another party. So I will be honest and stand here, or sit, hello everyone at the back, and say that the ideology of Labour, even though we have had many different leaders, of which some have been a little bit less popular than others. The message has always been the same. It is about the people, not the party. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne.
If I hold the microphone there, is that any better?
Greg can stand up and speak. Are we standing up?
I think I'm just further away from the microphone if I stand up, but I will try. I'll try and project.
If
Here we
you
go.
stand up and pick that microphone up, that'll work.
Okay.
It just wasn't on.
So, I don't think that one's doing anything.
It's lead back.
That one. Okay, so values. Unlike the other parties, we have had the same leader since the last election. Now, our leader is William Houston. You may have seen him on the television last night. We have not changed anything we've been saying for the last 4 years. What we believe in are some very clear values. Is that any good? Is that helping? We have some very clear values. We believe in families. We believe families are the bedrock of our society in whatever form they come. We believe a family is two committed individuals living together and raising children. Now, that's not easy these days, so that's why we think that families should be more supported. The cost of housing or trying to get social housing is problematical. My son was on the social housing list for 2 years before he managed to get anywhere. That's really not acceptable. People around here are seeing their families scattered across the country because people can't afford to live close to each other. And it's destabilising our society. So what our focus is really on making things much better for families so that communities can become cohesive and we can come united as a nation. The other thing that we stand for, we are totally unapologetic about being very proud of being British. We don't think British is a bad word. We think we should accept that, be proud of that, and cherish everything that we've achieved. We are strongly traditional. We are more conservative than the Conservative Party, but we are economically liberal. We believe that we need the people to create wealth in our society, but also they have to benefit those who cannot. So the other thing that we are very strong on women's rights. We believe that biological women have a right to safe spaces, and I think we're the only party who's willing to stand up and say that. Excuse me. So I think you will see us as a traditional but socially left-leaning party who has grown 500% in the last 4 years. So I hope you will look at our manifesto, which we've called Homecoming, because we want to get back to some true British values. Thank you.
Okay, so we're doing this standing up. This is actually easier. It's easier to talk this way. I joined the Liberal Democrats in 2016. I'll leave you to work out what might have prompted me to do that. But beyond that prompt, I'm proud to be a Liberal Democrat because their values are very closely aligned with my own values. And our values are that everybody should be free to lead self-determined good lives and that they need to be supported to do this. You cannot lead a self-determined free life if you don't have the opportunities given by good education, if you don't get health care, if you live in an environment that is degraded, where you don't have access to healthy natural spaces, where the environment is degraded to the point where we cannot grow the food that we need, where the climate causes havoc all over. All these are things where one's individual ability to lead the life that one wants comes to limits. We're also not all the same in terms of the opportunities that we get from our families, that we get from our background. So as Liberal Democrats, we believe very strongly that as much as possible, politics needs to provide people with opportunities so they can live a good life in the way that they wish to live it. And that is 100% what I stand for, and I do not believe that changes with who leads the Liberal Democrats. And that is why I'm now standing in front of you and saying, These are my beliefs. If they are your beliefs, you might want to consider voting for me.
Well, thank you for that question. It's a very complicated question. It's a very straightforward answer for the Green Party. Our policies are determined by our view of climate change as the biggest challenge that humankind has ever faced. Every policy, everything that we do is shaped by that belief, that understanding. But also that if we want to create a better world that is reshaped around the challenge of climate change, we have to ensure that we bring everyone with us. We cannot allow those who are most disadvantaged to be somehow left out because of the cost of new vehicles or whatever. We have to ensure that we bring everyone with us so that we don't end up with a fractured society that is less easy to live in than we have at the moment. You will have noticed we are trying to break the trend of egotistical leaders that seem to have their own agenda and try to bring their parties with them. And we have two leaders. We have Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey, who can help to shape the direction of our party in that way. And so we won't be determining the way that MPs in Parliament vote, but we will be ensuring that the Green vote across the country and those people from the Green Party who get elected are able to hold, whichever government there is, hold them to account for their pledges on climate change that they so easily make and so quickly break.
I know. I know as we stand up, but I'm not sure it makes much difference if I stand up, does it? Too many laughs there. All right. So we've just heard that climate change is the key issue that's going to bring poverty to many people. Disrupt food chains, which means food prices. It's going to disrupt energy prices. So the British economy, we have to become energy secure. And the concept of that is that if we are then the net exporters by leading the way in terms of this climate revolution, the green, clean industrial revolution, then we generate extra revenues which come to the country, the government's coffers, which we can spend on services, on education, on health, on potholes, and to really help improve the prosperity of this country. So as a consequence of that, what are the three things that aren't going to change? The first one is we're always going to be looking to make sure that the British economy can take advantage of this industrial revolution so that we don't get left behind in the UK again. Secondly, we will be pushing to restore, not net gain for biodiversity, but restoration of biodiversity. We've already lost more than 30%, 40% of the UK species, and 60% of UK mammals are at risk of extinction. That has to change, not just with the animals, So those are two things that aren't going to change. There is one more that isn't going to change. I'm a local councillor in Windsor. I've fought for the last 10, 20 years for people on planning issues, on bringing a new town council to local issues, on having to fight inappropriate planning regulations. So this is what I bring. I'm locally focused, locally driven. So that's the other aspect that isn't going to change. Industrial revolution and restoring biodiversity, everything else, I will fight for you.
I think this is a really fascinating question, actually, but to preface it, I think it is worth just reflecting that certainly the two main parties in the United Kingdom, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, are actually both grand coalitions. They both contain within them multiple strains of thought. In the Labour Party's case, from what I will casually call the Corbynistas through to Tony Blair and what we knew through his government much closer to the centre. Just as my own party goes from what's known as the One Nation Conservatives through to actually having, you often hear in the media, the Tory right. talked about. Actually, there are two Tory rights. There is the slightly more authoritarian one that I am not part of, and there is the more free market libertarian one, which I do more closely identify with. But if I was to summarise where I think the enduring values of the Conservative Party really are, the number one word that will come to my mind, which is what got me into politics, which is what attracted me to join the Conservative Party when I was 17 years old in 1996, on the eve of one of our biggest defeats. So I showed the conviction I had of joining the Conservative Party, is the word freedom. That belief that we should trust individuals to choose what is right for themselves and their families, that we should entrust professionals to get on to deliver services, not centrally manage it from Whitehall, that decisions should be taken at the lowest possible level. And actually, I think far more decisions should be taken at parish council and town council level in this country, because it is closer to the people that they affect. But on top of that, we also have that clear understanding as a party that the first duty of government is to defend our country, to defend the people in it, both from threats abroad, and we certainly live in a very challenging world right now with wars and conflict on multiple fronts, and also to keep people safe at home through strong law and order. And finally, that point that you can only have the first-rate public services we all want to see in healthcare and in education and in everything else if you have a strong and growing economy to pay for it. Because if you don't have the money, we won't get the services that we want. So economic growth is absolutely critical.
That was quite a difficult question, and I've been giving you all quite a lot of latitude with the length of your answers. You're going to get through as many questions you want to get through this evening. Keep trying to keep your answers relatively brief. A minute or so to the next questions would be great if you can do it. So, we're going to move on to everybody's favourite topic now, HS2. And it won't surprise you that the first question on this topic, to those of you who live in Wendover, will be coming from Murray Cook, who is in the audience. So, Murray, could you make yourself known, please?
The serenity of this church, which has been at the heart of the Wendover community for over 800 years, will be destroyed by HS2. Will your party cancel the entire project?
Yvonne.
Yeah, I think you would be mad to come here and not expect this question to come up. In terms of cancelling the project, do you mean rip up what's there already or stop with what's currently on the proposal? Because I think if you were to kind of remove the whole thing, you've got to kind of look at how much would it cost, what would the benefit be. And I absolutely get it. This is an eyesore for Wendover, and you've all been against it from the very beginning, and you probably feel totally unincluded in the solution. What is in the other manifestos for two of the parties is to revisit HS2 with a potential view to extending it. Now, I think that's a total no. I would say we've got to cut our losses on this. We don't want to spend any more money on this than we have to, but we have to make it as manageable as possible for you to carry on with your community life here. And the fact that it's impacting already so disastrously is appalling. So I would say rip out everything that's there and take it back to Fields. I think we're a bit beyond that. I don't think we can necessarily do that. But I would say no more spending than is absolutely necessary, and certainly no more expansion up and beyond where we currently are.
Anya.
Thank you for that question. And like probably everybody in this room, I realise what a massive disruption HS2 has been for Wendover and what the ongoing issues are in terms of traffic during the construction phase, the disruption. There are further issues to do with water management, with soundproofing, with the traffic guidance once the thing is supposed to have been built. My Liberal Democrat colleague in Cheshire and Amersham, Sarah Green, has been calling out on HS2 from the day she was elected and has voted or has proposed cancelling it a number of times. I I will be honest with you, I'm a bit conflicted on this one, because I definitely believe it should never have been planned in the way it has been planned. It's hideously expensive, it's been badly managed, and it has disrupted your lives. But stopping it now, we're left with a half-built railway. Well, actually, no, we're left with you having had years of disruption, lots of people across the county having had years of disruption, more years to come until you shut the remaining sites down, and then you don't even have a railway to show for it. So on that one, I think I would be hard-pressed to say, let's cancel it now. In terms of further expansion, I think that would be something for those areas in the north where it was meant to go. So it was meant to connect the north of the country with London, and now it's not going to go to the north, and there were talks of it not going to London, so obviously that's stupid. But we are halfway through this, so somehow this process has to be managed, that we end up not with an even bigger dog's breakfast than what it is already. So that is my view.
For this question. I mean, the Green Party has been consistently opposed to HS2 right from the beginning, way before dissenting voices within the government. Just a fraction of the money spent on HS2 invested into our rail infrastructure. We could have made some huge improvements, some big changes. Having said that, the damage has now already been done. Ancient woodlands have been ripped up. The watercourse in the Chilterns has been disrupted. There has been terrible damage has been caused by this abysmally managed project. Really, really appalling use of public money. But the damage has been done. Our position now is that having suffered the negative effects, having suffered the damage of HS2, it now needs to be finished. What an abysmal statement it would be for our people, for our government, if we go through all of this trauma and then leave it unfinished. It doesn't connect to London, it doesn't connect to Birmingham. We, having started it, having gone through this trauma, we need to see it finished.
I'm going to answer that question in two parts. The first part is this. We've got evidence that Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, misled Parliament at the box in Parliament. So the decision was taken based on misguiding information. As a consequence of that, we've been working with Michael Gross, who some of you know locally, and what's happening is that we want truth. First thing is we want truth. We want to make sure that people receive fair compensation for their losses and remediation. The second point is this. The second part of the question I'll answer this way. Wouldn't it be great if that was all restored? We have to restore nature. We have to look at developing biodiversity or building our networks, if nothing else for the air the oxygen that they create. And from the best part of it is to make sure that we have somewhere for our younger children, our grandchildren. Most of us have got skin in the game. We've got children and grandchildren. Do you want them living in a scarred environment with concrete everywhere? No. So the second part of the answer is, yeah, if we can, we will. We will cancel it.
Well, this is where I go rogue from my party. Because I've always been opposed to HS2. I have never at any point thought we could afford it as a country, either financially or environmentally. Now, when I arrived in Parliament in 2019, full of hope, I thought sense would be seen across the political divide, that this thing could not get the green light. But to my horror, basically all three major parties agreed with it. All three of them, corporately. And I stood out as a voice, probably about a voice of 60 or 70 MPs, mostly Conservative, but there were one or two from the Labour Party as well, who absolutely said, no, 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 this project is mad. This project is going to wreck too many lives. It's going to wreck too many livelihoods. It is going to destroy our environment, and it is going to destroy the nation's finances as well. Think of all the other things we could have done with that money. So I have never given up on trying to get the whole thing scrapped. And I give everyone in this room and everyone in this constituency my word that I will ignore any whip that tells me to vote for anything to do with HS2, just as I have broken my party's whip to vote against bits of HS2 that have been proposed in the last Parliament. The main act was passed in 2017 before I was an MP, but I would have voted against it. And I've worked actually across the political divide with great people like Tony Berkeley, who is actually a Labour member of the House of Lords, who is equally consistently opposed to HS2. And he's done some great work that shows that even though it is a mind-numbing amount of money, we can get, if we scrapped it now, the overall loss down to about £8 billion. And whilst that is an eye-watering amount of money, I put it to this audience, is it not better to lose that 8 billion than spend another 50, 60, 70, 80 billion, whatever it turns out to be in the end? The chief exec and the chairman of HS2 Limited casually added 10 billion quid to the bill at the last time he appeared before the Transport Select Committee. Is it not better to lose that amount of money than keep wasting money hand over fist, restore what can be restored, and then have a conversation amongst ourselves in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire and Northamptonshire and everywhere else that this railway affects so badly about what we are willing to consent with that land that can't be fully restored, and have that conversation locally and with everybody's consent. I think that is the best way to go forward. I have always said no to HS2, and I will take any opportunity to scrap it.
We have another question on HS2, because I think we all... Sorry, I apologise. Yeah, you're quite right.
In all this time to stand up. HS2. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but I actually work in construction. It's what I was doing full-time as a national account manager before I started campaigning full-time. And we actually have a saying for HS2, it's called disastrous 2, because any time that anybody has mentioned it, we've all said what a terrible idea it was. And it wasn't necessarily a terrible idea in the sense that, you know, high-speed rail going from one end of the country to the other, because changing several times just to go from the top to the bottom is a pain in the butt. But the planning around it, the professionals in the construction industry has said it was a bad idea. Now, it has been absolutely, utterly devastating as someone who loves wildlife, someone who loves the countryside, to see the damage that HS2 has done. And I have to thank Greg for speaking up and opposing it. But unfortunately, his party has ploughed on and not listened. It's been a bad idea, this whole planning situation. The project has caused unforgivable damage, which is done and cannot be reversed. And even though we've spent so much money on it, is it really a good idea to cancel it? And I ask you this, the idea of cancelling something that you've invested so much in, is it not worth taking and salvaging what we have and actually making it work for us? It needs to be completely reviewed, don't get me wrong, but it is a scar on the landscape. We are never going to get back that countryside that has been lost. So it is best we take a terrible situation, an awful situation, and make the best out of it. I am standing here today at someone in the construction industry that wants to hold the government account for all the different projects that are going on, to review these different projects and make sure that anything going forward is working in collaboration with people like the Woodlands Trust, like the Wildlife Trust, to ensure that what we've got left is a habitat, a sustainable area that HS2, even though started off as an awful decision, we can salvage something out of it.
Right, we have a second question on HS2, and I think you'll appreciate the importance of spending time on this subject even now. So the question comes from Andrew Band, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, so you've got me instead. So his question is, what will you do if elected for this constituency, to secure some benefit from HS2 in terms of improving our dire transport links, and in particular reinvigorating the previously planned Aylesbury link to the east-west rail line. Anya.
Thank you. And that, I think, is the £60 million question. It has to be done. We have to get some benefit from this. And I would stand up in Parliament and call for policies that do indeed, as Charisma said, as Greg has alluded to as well, hold HS2 to account. There has been a colossal waste of money. So far, communities have seen pretty much no benefit at all, except the odd little bit of corporate social responsibility money here and there, the footpath here and there. I would very much like to see the Aylesbury link to East-West Rail, because we're talking of rail infrastructure. East-West Rail is a good idea in principle. It's also using, by and large, existing track. But not to have it connect to Aylesbury is stupid, right? It's no good. Well, I mean, it is still of some good, but it's nowhere near as good. So yes, HS2 and EWR are two different companies. It is not beyond the wit of a government to make sure that some of the benefits come to Buckinghamshire. So that is one possible benefit. The other thing that really needs to happen, there's a lot of land that's been taken up by East-West Rail as well, actually, but down here, or in this part of the constituency, you're mostly concerned with HS2. That needs to be returned to communities wherever possible in a better state. There is an opportunity to get better parklands, get community assets, restore wildlife habitats. Actually, create new, better wildlife habitats. Again, this is something that is still open. This can still happen. And I would stand up in Parliament at every given opportunity. I would work cross-party. I would talk with HS2 at every given opportunity. And I would also work strongly with parish councils and a local council to make this happen.
In reality, this is a question of two parts, two unrelated parts, really. HS2 is a disaster. We all will accept that. And there really needs to be some sort of public inquiry to understand just how badly it's been handled, and to learn from it so that we don't go down this road, this line in the future. So that's really important to get that sorted, and to use that as an opportunity to, as far as possible, to restore some of the damage that's been done, whilst accepting that having created this scar in the landscape, it needs to run as a railway, so that we get some benefit. The country, the people of the country get some benefit from it. But the second part of the question, which is, to my mind, far more important now, that decision has been made, far more important, and that's about our transport infrastructure. We, as a country, need to start investing in our transport infrastructure. In the last 10 years, there's been something like a 50% reduction in rural bus services. Our railways are increasingly badly run. The Arriva bus company across this area has decided to pull out. The whole infrastructure for public transport in this country is in a dire state, and we need to see investment put back into it. A lot of these elements of the national infrastructure brought back into public control, so that we can have a planned, reasonable and connected public transport infrastructure. Now, all of that is separate from the disaster that's HS2, and all of that brings a positive benefit both to people and to businesses. And we know from lots of research and lots of papers that have been put together that public transport networks really help to support local business.
Can you hear now? Great. This is a question of two parts. The first is that I would absolutely push for the truth to come out, and then public inquiry would be a great step to getting the truth out, who told lies, who misled, and how can we... Sure. And, okay, in terms of local links, then we're going back to our first principles, which is that we want a clean, green industrial revolution. We want to get to net zero. So where the solutions say that we build on the extra rail lines that are existing at the moment to improve the links to Aylesbury, or even to introduce a spur off that. If that is a better solution than green bus services, then that's the way we go. So it will depend on what the most environmentally friendly and appropriate or sort of convenient solution is for people of this area.
There are multiple parts to that question. If we take East West Rail first, East West Rail has largely, for what I'll call our bit of it, through Buckinghamshire, recreated an old railway cutting. The company did make a bit of a hash of constructing some of that, and I have been just as much on their backs as I've been on HS2's backs over the last 4.5 years. But actually, we've set a really important precedent with East West Rail, and it was a victory that I was pushing for a very long time, that East West Rail finally accepted that it was on them to repair and fully resurface 21 roads that their HGVs had broken, not the Buckinghamshire council taxpayers' responsibility to fix those roads. And so having got that precedent now, and having got East West Rail resurfacing those 21 roads, the pressure is on HS2 to fix that which they have broken. All of those routes that thousands of HGVs have trundled along and churned up and made to resemble the surface of the moon. That is something that I will keep pushing on, and I think is very important. On the spur, I absolutely agree that the Aylesbury spur should be built from East West Rail into the centre of the town of Aylesbury. It was always intended to be part of East West Rail. It should be part of East West Rail. HS2 is basically building the Aylesbury spur in order to bring aggregates up to the Calvert Box area. So therefore, I think it is imperative that we do have that link to serve the town of Aylesbury, which will ultimately actually have a beneficial effect on the wider area. On wider transport links, this is something else I have been inextricably campaigning on and aware of for a long time, and pushing Chiltern Railways on, and that is to get them back to the gold standard they once were. I think we all have to accept that Chiltern Railways have fallen off a cliff a little bit. And a lot of that, I use Chiltern Railways a lot myself. My nearest station is Hadnam, but I used to get on at Wendover when I lived here. Both the Aylesbury branch and the Chiltern main line are overcrowded. There are times where people are left on the platform. There are times when the trains are just boiling hot and people are almost passing out. I even met one guy the other day who opted to sit in the toilet the whole way because he just simply couldn't stand up. We've already got Chiltern to get 2 extra trains into the rush hours from July. We are actively pushing to get them some temporary trains onto both the Aylesbury branch and the main line to massively relieve overcrowding at rush hour periods, all the way through to their 2030 absolute full and total fleet renewal, which will get them back to the gold standard. So something that gets them across the line so we're not overcrowded now, and something that completely renews the fleet with a clean, modern, hopefully hydrogen or battery electric or clean technology by 2030. That, I think, is one of the most pressing priorities for everybody that uses Chiltern Railways.
Hi, so as I said, I mentioned I work in construction, and I sort of partially answer this question. But what I'm happy to say is Labour is actually looking at ending the chaos by developing a 10-year infrastructure strategy, which is aligned with our industrial strategy and also regional development priorities, which includes HS2 and the East West Rail. As somebody who has had dealings with transportation with trains previously, I know that franchises have been cutting very, very close to their margins in order to make sure that their shareholders are getting a little bit of money in their pockets. So for me, it is in making sure that we are on this boat, that Labour is
going to be looking directly at this problem and that we are actually able to invest. So I will be on that championing on making sure that this comes to fruition. One thing I also want to state is actually the mismanagement that has happened along the way. It is about bringing to light what has been in the dark and keeping companies accountable for their mismanagement. And it's working together in collaboration, putting conditions in place so corners aren't being cut, that mismanagement isn't going to go forward, learning from the mistakes, and actually making what is an absolute disaster beneficial for everyone. And that's why I'm here today, is because I'm representing the Labour Party's view in that we need to get this country back on track. We need to stop the chaos, and we actually need to have a plan in place, a plan that works, and a plan that has actually been implemented by people who know what they're doing. Yeah, well, it feeds into the local community because it's something that I would be championing for this community.
Okay, so I'm a project manager. I would approach this with my project management head on. HS2, mostly sunk costs. We're not going to see any of that money back. It's gone. There is a facility there. Is there anything useful we can potentially get out of what's left, the remnant? So what I would want to do is look at the whole transport needs across this community and cost them all out, look at the value, relative value of each of these things and what they would bring to it, and then make some strategic decisions about which ones were going to bring most value to the community and what, if any, value we can get out of what's left of HS2. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to the subject of the NHS, and I'm hoping that Ellie van der Heuvel, I don't know, is somewhere in the audience. Let's put your hand up and Mike will come across to you.
Thank you. Okay, slightly long question. My dad, in his late 80s, had an emergency catheterisation when he was away visiting my...
Ask the question at the end, that would be great, because the rest of it is rather personal.
Okay, well, what I can say is that he suffered for a whole year. It cost the NHS a fortune, and he ended up going private because he can go private. The NHS is in a dreadful mess. So could the candidates please explain how their party will tackle the chronic underfunding of the NHS?
Thank you for that, and I'm really sorry to hear about your father. What a disaster, and what a story that we hear so often. The NHS is in a terrible state, and it's in a terrible state, as you very eloquently say, because of underfunding. We need to ensure that we put the adequate funding into the NHS so that we can stop the creeping privatisation and start to improve services. Part of the problem, of course, with the NHS is about staff retention, and that's because we're not paying staff sufficiently to do the jobs in which they're required to do. We have something like 12,500 vacancies within the NHS, unfilled posts. That needs to be put right. We need to ensure that the quite considerable wealth of our community is directed where it's needed. And the Green Party has got a very clear policy that there are those people who earn the greatest or have the greatest amount of money, those multi-millionaires. We need to pay an extra 1% of tax, and that would cover the money that needs to go into the NHS to improve services. And just finally, on ambulance times is another key problem, key issue. 15 years ago, we were all complaining that to wait for an ambulance, you had to wait 35 minutes. Last year, I wrote it down, it's 1 hour 10 minutes you can expect. 90% of ambulances to arrive on average 1 hour 10 minutes. The state that we've allowed the NHS to get into is abysmal, and we need to turn that around, and we need to do it very quickly, and that means investment.
I'm going to answer this question in two parts. The first part is going back to this clean green industrial revolution and doubling of the British economy, which brings in a lot of money from exports, which gives you a lot of extra money to invest in the NHS, in education and public services. So that money will be coming in not this year, not next year, but if we follow this path, by the end of the 2030s. The other aspect is going to be to do with energy costs. So one of the major costs for the NHS, for anyone who's got a large building, large numbers of buildings, is energy costs. So one of the key aspects of the policy is to reduce energy usage, so to provide grants, free grants, we'll see that's what a grant is, for retrofits. So retrofits meaning improving the insulation, improving the quality of the building so that its energy usage drops substantially. In places like Amsterdam in Denmark, the energy bills are dropping by 80%. And hospitals and education and public services will be able to keep that money, the reduction in their fuel bills, which could be £1 billion a year, and reinvest as the local trusts see fit in the health services or the different medical needs for that area. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, can I say to the questioner what happened to your father was clearly unacceptable, and it shouldn't have happened that way, and he should have got the first-class care that, talking to a lot of constituents, some do get and some don't. Some don't, and I will be clear and honest and straightforward about that. I think the challenges that the NHS faces can be solved in three ways. Money sits across all of those. Tens of billions of pounds extra have gone into the NHS over the last few years. We can have a debate about whether that's enough, but tens of billions of pounds extra have gone into the NHS over recent years, and my party's manifesto is very clear that we will increase the NHS budget over inflation every single year of the next Parliament. But I think there are three areas we need to look at to properly face the challenges that we have and to improve things for everyone. The first is around people, the second is around the NHS estate, and the third is around technology and the improvements in medical science. So on people, we do now have the long-term NHS workforce strategy. That does look to double the number of doctors, but there is no, and I'll be totally honest, there is no instant gratification in that, because it takes 7 years to do a medical degree, unless you do it at the University of Buckingham, we'll do it in 4. And then the rotations, before they can start to specialise or train to be a GP. So anyone that tells you that they will suddenly solve the NHS workforce overnight, that just isn't going to happen, but decisions have been taken to increase those number of medical places and get those doctors and nurses into training. The second is around estates. Well, we have seen a brand new children's A&E open at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. The maternity suite has been completely rebuilt, and having 2 of my children born there, it needed it, but that has happened in the last few years at Stoke Mandeville, as well as more bed space. I am working with the Department for Health and Social Care to get a new clinical hub at Wickham Hospital, because the ageing tower there and the maintenance issues from that is costing around 2,000 hours of operating time a year. It is critical we get the estate right so that it is there and functional to be able to serve the needs of patients. And the third is medical technology and the improvements in medical science. I've done a lot in the last Parliament on things like minimally invasive cancer therapies and radiotherapy technology to get that onto the front line and to ensure it is not a lottery of where you happen to be under a consultant that has developed that new therapy or treatment. That is something that I think if we get that right, we can get these incredible new treatments that can deliver what used to take a 6-month period of radiotherapy into 6 weeks. Then it's kinder on the patient, and it is going to ensure that the NHS works better.
So I mentioned in my introduction that my mum is a phlebotomist, but she's actually a phlebotomist for an agency, because the NHS, being a full-time employee, would actually not pay the bills. So it is not just a case of we need to throw money at it, it is actually a mismanagement going on, where somebody who can be an agency staff member is getting paid a little bit better just than a full-time NHS nurse. So Labour's mission is to not only invest into the NHS, but to actually have reform, to take these contractors, these agencies, and have a look and see where we're actually losing money. Because I don't know about you, but it does feel as though I'm at a bit of a gamble as to where, if my care is going to be good or not. And sometimes it gets so frustrating that you do go private. And there are those who can't go private or don't have the option to go private. And I think that is disgraceful. So Labour's mission is to go hand in hand with fundamental reform of the NHS, because it's not yesterday that we got in this position. It has been a long time of not investing in the right place, allowing agencies to take over, mismanagement, getting more people waiting to be seen in primary care, where they are getting sicker and sicker, and by the time they get to the secondary care, it's almost too late. We need to actually invest in not only secondary care, but primary care, so the people who are having those issues aren't constantly seeing their GP when they should be seeing a professional. It is unacceptable, and only reform is going to change that. Labour has seen this position before. It saved the NHS once, and it's planning to save the NHS again. But it can only do that by looking at the issues that are going, learning from them, listening to the professionals, and actually making the changes that we need to see with no prejudice and putting its people first before any profit agency.
I've worked in clinical trials across the whole of Europe, and I can tell you that the NHS is markedly underperforming compared to the rest of Europe. I think we sit here and think throwing money at it will fix things. It absolutely won't. The NHS, as we know, is a complete dinosaur. What we need to do is radically reform the way it works. It's currently struggling to catch up with digital technology when the rest of the world is moving to AI, and we can't just fuel what's currently in place. We would, as the SDP, take out anything in the NHS that isn't immediately adding clinical value. That's a lot of the processes, a lot of the things they do are kind of laudable, but just not affordable. So we want to reform it completely and bring it up to date to something that's fit for the current time. Thank you.
This is a really important question, and I would like also to add that I am very sorry to hear about the terrible situation that you've gone through with your dad. And I know you're not the only one. You know, this happens all across the country, it happens all across the county. We've heard quite a bit about hospitals, and very often when we do talk about health, we think primarily about hospitals, and our hospitals do need fixing. But that's not the only aspect of healthcare. So there is primary care. A lot of people have been struggling to see their GPs. That isn't necessarily because GPs don't want to see you. It is because they are struggling. So we need to fix primary care. Of course, we cannot suddenly magic a lot of fully trained GPs out of nowhere. But there are also a lot of people leaving the profession because they find it stressful. And they're not always waiting till they're 65 before they leave it either. There are locum GPs across the country who now cannot find work because this is the law of unintended consequences. Some of the investment that's gone into GP practices for recruiting other medical specialists means they now don't have the money to recruit the GPs or the locums. So that clearly needs looking at again. So we need to fix that. Related to that, the NHS dental care needs looking at. Dental contracts need looking at, so dentists are again incentivized to take on NHS patients. We need to look at public health. There are public health measures, not just on dental care, but very specifically on dental care, which probably would see the dental health of children in particular improve relatively quickly. So there is somewhere that would cost money, but the benefit would be enormous. And at the other end, we also need to look at care. And in this case, I mean, we need to look at care generally speaking, because this is something that so many of us will be needing. And I'm not going to repeat everything that the Liberal Democrats have said about this because we might be here for quite a while. But what I am saying, there are a lot of people in hospital who've had treatment, who could go home, but they can't go home because they haven't got a care plan in place. So that is something else we need to look at. If we fix both of those ends, then the NHS would get some pressure relief, and that would enable the reforms, that would enable looking at how within the hospital, or not the NHS, but the hospitals would get some pressure relief, and that would help us to look at what's going on in the hospitals.
Now going to move on to a question on food banks from Trish Thomas. If you could identify yourself.
Thanks, George. Food banks. In 2010, the Trussell Trust operated 35 food banks across the UK. By 2019, this had risen to 1,300. Currently, there are 2,000 food banks supporting 3 million people. Is this an acceptable position for this country to find itself in? If not, what plans do our candidates have to eliminate the need for food banks?
It's been an absolute tragedy to watch since 2019, since COVID in 2020, the rise of demand on food banks. So, I mean, I'm involved with the food bank, or rather what started off as a COVID relief charity, but has turned into a poverty relief charity. And people come to us for a number of reasons. One is that they don't have enough work. A lot of it is mental health issues. They really are lost hope. And another aspect is really crisis within the family. So how are we going to deal with those three things? In terms of losing hope, well, if we are focused on one vision, which is to get Britain in the Industrial Revolution, we have a clear sight that we're going to deal with climate change and get to the problem solved, that's going to help one with depression, in the sense that you've got better countryside, you've got better focus, you've got an idea that we're in this together and there isn't a have and have not. Where we're working together as a community. So the other aspect is in the Industrial Revolution is going to be the change in jobs. So we're going to see a huge numbers of new industries develop, and by putting in money into those industries, by giving lots of new research and development grants so that we can, as a nation, lead the world in terms of solutions, that's going to generate lots of new styles of jobs. To go with those jobs, you're going to need more training, retraining, better training, and better quality jobs. So within those sort of that mix of solutions, it's not a magic bullet, but we're seeing and hoping that together, working together in better paid jobs, in things that give you more fulfillment, and will reduce the demand on food banks. Thank you.
The straightforward answer to your question is no. No, it's not acceptable for so many people to be reliant on food banks. But before I substantially answer the question, I would like to say a huge thank you to everybody that is involved in volunteering in a food bank and makes those food banks happen and available to people. They are genuine community heroes, and I have worked with some of them. I have been out on a number of occasions collecting for food banks and secured some quite big donations into local food banks over the last few years. The challenge is to ensure that everybody actually is earning enough money, or where they can't work is being supported with enough money through the welfare system to ensure that they can afford food. Now, clearly there is a mismatch right here, right now. But actually, to agree with the previous comments, actually ensuring that we have a higher pay economy where everybody is getting paid more so that they can afford food and heating and everything else that goes with it, does involve ensuring that we do have that growing economy. We are giving businesses the ability to grow and invest and create more jobs and new product lines or services or whatever it might be here in Buckinghamshire. So that is the bedrock. I think it... No?
I'm sorry, we're not allowing any interruptions from the audience.
I think that was just Siri going off or something. That probably sets everyone's off now.
Yep.
But the wider point I'd make is that we have increased benefits over inflation the last few years for those that are dependent on them. Is that enough? We can have a debate about that. I'm very happy to have that debate. I've seen a lot of people in my surgeries, and I made the case to the Chancellor over multiple budgets that actually we did need to increase benefits over inflation for those people, and I'm glad that multiple Chancellors have done that. We do have 4 million people more in work since 2010 than there were at the end of the last government. That's good news. We can still get more people. We can still actually beat the record low unemployment that we've got today. But there are also other schemes out there that I think it's really important that all of us bear on our shoulders to ensure people know about. So there's the 36 billion Household Support Fund, which is administered here in Buckinghamshire by our council, known as Helping Hands. And actually it's been quite disheartening for me on one level, but happy in the way that I've been able to help when I've perhaps visited schools over the last 4 years and the head teacher has said that perhaps some pupils are struggling with food or with getting a new pair of shoes or whatever. And I've said, have you directed them to Helping Hands? Have you directed them to the Household Support Fund? And they didn't know anything about it. So I have been able to get those families in touch with that help that is there and is available through the council. And we've got to do more to ensure that what money is out there to help people is known about and is well signposted and people are going and getting it because the money is there to help in so many cases.
The answer to the question is no, it's disgraceful. I actually grew up on free school meals because my mum was a single parent living in a council house, and I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have those free school meals. Here in Buckinghamshire, we're one of the richest counties, and I'm going to give you this total here. A record number of emergency food parcels were handed out last year, a total of 23,169 to people across the county. It is a disgrace, an absolutely disgrace. And this morning, Rishi Sunak was asked by a health worker, I believe Sophie on LBC, what he planned to do about food bank usage. And he said, I want to bring that number down. When pressed as to how he was going to do that, he didn't really have a reply. I think Stop the Rumbling Tums doesn't really sound as catchy, so it doesn't seem like he's got a plan for it. So for me, my mother had security in knowing that I managed to come home at least not starving from just eating breakfast. And the Labour Party is committed to allowing free breakfast clubs in every primary school, so no child goes hungry. That then allows their parents to know that they've at least got one good meal in them, because let's be honest, breakfast is the food of kings. It's the best part of the day. So knowing that your child has had a good breakfast when you couldn't provide it is vital, but this is a short-term solution to a long-term problem, and it is about addressing that need of getting better paying jobs. But while we are working on that, that free school meal could be the difference between a child learning and being able to progress in life, or going hungry and wondering what is going to be for dinner next. So we need to look at ensuring that people are having enough food, and the best step forward is making sure children are being fed at school, and that is what Labour is planning to do.
So, totally agree, absolutely not acceptable. And it's caused by a number of reasons. Predominantly, I would say it's caused by housing costs. My son has worked for the Royal Opera House for a number of years in a technical function, and he's only ever been offered a 0 hours contract. That is not acceptable. Employers have a responsibility to make sure they're offering decent wages and proper contracts to people. That's just unforgivable. He's relied on food banks, and thank goodness they're there, because him and his partner, who's also in childcare, would be deeply struggling. So it's housing costs. He's gone into social housing, and his housing costs halved. Now that's just such a difference to a young family trying to get going, that we need more of those social housing facilities available. We've got to build those facilities, otherwise our communities are going to be shattered. Take utilities. Look what's happened to the electricity and gas bills. And do they need to charge so much? Well, yeah, I guess gas and oil suppliers are limited. However, how much profit are they still making? We would like to take the ownership of the utilities back into the UK, so they're in public ownership, so they're not going off to fund some foreign companies overseas. So that needs to end as well. Food is actually cheaper now than it has been for a very long time, but these is other costs that's driving people to destitution, and we need to do something fairly dramatic to help them. Thank you.
So we clearly have an outbreak of agreement here. I'm not going to say my answer is also no. This rise in the use of food banks is unacceptable. I would like, as a town mayor, one of my mayor's charities is a food bank. And I always say that I deeply deplore that they have to exist at all, but I'm very glad they're there to pick up the pieces when nobody else will pick up the pieces. And again, if anybody who works in a food bank who donates, you have my heartfelt thanks for that. But it can't go on. There are people in work who are using food banks. Most of the people who use food banks aren't layabouts. They're not people or people who are unemployed. They are often people in work, or they're people on benefits, but the benefits don't suffice. They don't reach to paying the bills, paying for the housing, and paying for the food. So, yes, we need economic growth, but we also need to make sure that that economic growth reaches those who suffer the most. So for that, we need to look at how we tax, not income tax, but how we do generate money so we can increase benefits. As Liberal Democrats, we are proposing that straight away we should remove the two-child benefit cap, because it puts children in poverty. Children who are innocent, no matter what else goes on in their lives, it's not their fault. They should not go hungry. And yes, that would cost money, but that would be money that would be morally so well spent. Yeah? I think we also need to look again at what an actual living wage would be, and how can we get there? How can we encourage that? Yes, 0-hour contracts where people cannot make ends meet even though they do 3 jobs. All of those things need looking at. And we are still a wealthy country. We're still one of the biggest economies in the world. It cannot be beyond the possibilities of this country to solve that problem.
Yes. Thank you for that question. And yes, of course, we all agree food banks are a national disgrace. Really, when I was first elected as a councillor for this area, one of the first things I went to do was went up to visit our local food bank and was appalled at the statistics and keep in touch with their statistics. About 10 years ago, there was about 120,000 visits to the food bank. That was appalling. Last year, that's just in this area. Last year, it was almost 350,000 visits to food banks in this area. It's absolutely unacceptable for a wealthy area like this. And if you visit the food banks, they'll tell you that most of the people that go there are in work. They're people that are working. So there are 2 things to do immediately, and to agree with Anya. Firstly, the minimum wage needs to rise to a living wage. It shouldn't be a level where people cannot afford to eat. And secondly, of course, the two-child benefit ceiling needs to be scrapped. That is just cruel, and it doesn't save a great deal of money for the country, but it causes no end of misery. In relation to the broader costs, the squeezes on people in this area, there's the rent costs are rising at a faster rate than people's ability to pay. 10% rise generally in rents across this area. We need to start to get a cap on rent so that local authorities can start to impose restriction on rental rises, because we're just squeezing people who are hard-working people. We're squeezing them from every angle, and we need to just start getting a bit more humane about the way that we run this society.
Okay, going to move on to another subject now of sewage. Mike Beckley, if you can identify yourself over here, the microphone, please.
The quality of the water on UK beaches and in our rivers and canals is appalling. The BBC reports that in 2023, 584,000 sewage discharges. LBC report that there are 83 no-swim beaches in the country. This is mostly due to water companies repeatedly discharging untreated sewage into our rivers and seas, mainly for profit-related motives. My question is, what are you and your parties going to do about it?
So the discharges are disgusting. You're right. That there's been a lot of clickbait politics around this particular issue in recent years. So let's go back to the beginning. Well, let's go back to 2010. 7% of sewage outflows had a monitor on them. 7. Today, 100% of sewage outflows have a monitor on them. So we actually understand the scale of the problem for the first time. And it is disgusting, and it does need to stop. And the last government did pass the Environment Act, which does demand that the water companies essentially rebuild our Victorian sewage system. Because anyone that says we can just stop it overnight, I'm afraid that isn't reality. Because it is a binary sewage system that we have. That when the storm tanks are full at the sewage treatment works, and when they do need to discharge it, there are 2 places it can be discharged to. It can either, horribly and regrettably, go into the waterways, or it can come back into your house. And therefore, the lesser of 2 evils in that, until the approximately £190 billion project to rebuild our sewage network can actually be done and be completed, the lesser of 2 evils is not to turn everyone's toilet into a massive poo geyser. That is, I'm afraid, the harsh reality of the situation. The Environment Act, which I voted for, does demand the water companies get on with this. We are bringing in fines for the illegal discharge of sewage. It is something that categorically has to stop. It is horrible. But anyone that says it can be stopped overnight, I'm afraid it is not reality, and this is going to take billions of pounds over quite a long period of time to fully crack down on.
So I actually didn't know the facts a couple of years ago. I think there was a program with Joe Lycett who actually did a little bit of a stunt just to represent how much waste was being discharged into our sea. And while it was quite funny, it did bring home just how much waste is going into our clean water. And it's absolutely disgraceful. And I think the public now realize, if they haven't already done, just how bad this situation has got. And it is disgraceful that these companies are still awarding their bosses bonuses when they cannot even keep their promises. I understand why discharge happens, but they are doing it illegally. They are doing it. It should be an exception to the rule, not part of the rule, in order for them to make sure they hit their targets. Britain's coast, rivers, lakes are being polluted by illegal sewage, and there is complacency with all the measures that have been in place, a little bit of leniency, because let's be honest, these companies are not invested in us, they are invested in their pocket. If you look at where these companies are based, most of them have a national water service. They don't have privately owned water companies running their own water. This is a money-making project for them, and it's letting us down. And the only way we can hold them accountable is to make sure there are measures in place. Illegal sewage dumping needs to be stopped. There needs to be consequences to these actions. It is not something that's going to be done overnight. But we need to put the conditions in place that dumping sewage water is a hell of a lot worse than them getting a little bit of a fine and a slap on the wrist, which is what they're getting now. So we are planning to keep them accountable. And I can say here that these measures are going to be putting failing water companies under special measures to clean up our water. And we are going to have regulations that stop these bosses from getting their paycheck if they're not doing the bare minimum. Because I don't know about you, but if I went to work, did bare minimum, and at the end of the month when I didn't hit any of my targets says, could I have my bonus now? I know I'd be laughed at. So why are we not holding these people to account? Why are we allowing them to not invest in the waterways? They've got the contracts, they've got the money. So why aren't we holding them account? A Labour government will hold them account, will put these measures in place and dare them try and put illegal sewage and get their bonuses at the same time.
Again, this is what happens when you sell off British industries to foreign owners. They really couldn't care less as what is happening to us as long as they're getting their profit from the business. Again, it needs to come back into British ownership and British management for the benefit of the people, not profit. There's a bigger issue, though, at a local level. I don't trust any of the data that's coming out of the water authorities. I think we should critically look at all of it. I think we should have independent testing. And I think you as people, it's a key part of your leisure time to involve using waterways, and certainly with yourselves and your animals and your families, you go out and you enjoy these facilities, but just how polluted are they? So we need a proper local monitoring service so we can let people know just how dangerous these waters are, and then we need to put on some local measures to try and clean them up as best we can.
Again, an outbreak of agreement, at least, that this is scandalous. The amount of sewage going into, raw sewage going into our rivers, into our waterways is scandalous. And Liberal Democrats have been calling it out for at least 2-3 years. We have been banging on about it. Yes, we have a crumbling infrastructure. Yes, we still have far too many combined sewers, which cause exactly that problem. When it rains a lot, you get the sewage mixed with rainwater. They are designed to do that. They're not big enough. They can't cope with it when it rains a lot. We also get a lot of discharges when it doesn't rain a lot. And that doesn't need to happen. And that is where we have the illegal dumping, and that can stop. I'm also asking, the water companies were privatized quite some time ago, over 30 years ago, with a promise that the money that we are now all paying to them would go into replacing the infrastructure and building it up. I did research with them at the time. I spoke with them in the early 90s. And that is what they said. We now have more money than we had before. We can invest in this thing. So where the hell has that investment been? So what we need is legally binding targets to stop at least the worst sewage dumping into bathing waters, into environmentally sensitive sites by 2030 at the very latest. We also need a tough new regulator. Ofwat is not doing the job. They haven't been given the ability to hold the water companies to account. The Environment Agency also needs beefing up because they have lost so many staff, they've lost so many powers, there's so many things they don't even go out and look at anymore. So we need to beef up the regulators. And we need to stop bonuses being paid out. We need to make sure the money goes back into the infrastructure.
straightforward answer to this question. The water companies need to be brought back into public ownership. Absolutely. Since privatisation, about £80 billion has been paid out to shareholders. Coincidentally, it's about the same amount of money that is needed to be invested in the infrastructure so that we can avoid the pollution of the seas and pollution of the rivers. We need to put an end to the way that the water companies have been allowed to continue. So bringing them back into public ownership, properly regulating the services that people deserve, that we all deserve, is the only sensible way to go forward.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely no sewage outflows, full stop. They have to be banned, a legal ban on this. And now, the trouble with the sewage outflows is obviously it affects our bathing water, it affects the local ecosystems, destroys them. And so you've got a reduction in biodiversity, and you've also got increased carbon emissions. None of those things are helpful. So if we had targets to stop both the sewage emissions and, of course, the making sure that they are net zero, then all of those things would stop. How would they stop? Well, there's two ways we can do this. One is that we can put in place fines on directors individually. That's a very difficult thing to do, but we can start. The next point is fines on the companies themselves, huge fines, not small fines, massive fines, which will deter them from actually doing this in the future, or they'll start to put that money into investment in infrastructure. Now, here's an interesting point, and by the way, that money, those fines should be ring-fenced to reinvest in clean-up, remediation, and enhancing ecosystems. Here's an interesting point. The biggest shareholders in Thames Water are pension funds. And the biggest one of those, OMA's, Ontario Municipal, they're about 30%. They've written off the value of Thames Water on their books to zero. That means it shouldn't cost too much to buy it up again, to renationalise Thames Water. So that's something we would propose. How do we do that? Where would we get the money from? Well, fundamentally, we go back to the green, clean industrial revolution, and make sure that Britain leads the way with that, with export revenues coming in and using that fund to also help renationalise all of the water companies, or certainly Thames Water.
Okay, I'm going to try and fit in two more questions, so I'm really going to ask all of you to be very precise on these answers. So the first question is on housing from Julian Dimitrov, if he's here. Is he here? No. Right, I'm going to ask the question then. How would you seek to create more homes for people in Mid Buckinghamshire whilst balancing the environmental costs of those buildings? So if you could try and limit your answers to a minute, that would be...
I've got 60 seconds to talk about a massive, a huge topic. So, as I said, I work in construction. There are very many ways we can work hand in hand with developers, but it's also making sure we keep developers accountable. We need to put in strict conditions that they're not just building on wildlife, that they're not disturbing habitations, that they're not going to just put any house up there so that it can bring the best profit in for them. We need to make the right houses, affordable houses for our young people, bungalows and stuff for our older generation, and houses enough for our family, because these 3-4 bedroom houses that keep going up are not necessarily serving the whole public. We need to make sure developers are kept accountable, make sure that we're building with the conditions that they are looking at the habitation, that they are looking at the environment, and they're choosing environmentally safe materials in order for our wildlife and habitation to keep thriving. That is something, as someone in construction, that I know what these contracts looks like. I know how to get these environmental people involved, and I'm being told to wrap up. So yeah, it is something that we just need to monitor and ensure that those developers are being kept in check.
Yeah, again, social housing is a must. We have to have it, but we live in Buckinghamshire, so we're all very twitchy about unattractive developments. There has to be a very strict design code for any new housing in Buckinghamshire, so it absolutely looks as it fits in and it's appropriate. We don't want to extend the footprint of towns. We don't want our towns sprawling across the open land, so we have to be very clever about potentially increasing the housing density, perhaps putting smaller houses on a large plot, or potentially putting another layer on bungalows. But there are clever things we can do that will maximise our housing capability without infringing on our natural environment.
We are building a lot of housing, we're not building enough housing, we're not building the right housing. As Liberal Democrats, we are proposing to build 150,000 social housing every year. That would help those people who need it the most. We also need to change our design codes. We are waiting for the Buckinghamshire local plan. It's now long overdue, but eventually we might get one. And it will hopefully enshrine a design code that asks for genuinely sustainable housing. Housing that is energy efficient. Housing that's energy efficient to start with. That will reduce the cost of living and it will help the environment, but there are also all sorts of things. Why on earth are we still building on floodplains? Why are we still building houses on stilts in order to make sure they don't get flooded? So the design code, the local plan is really important, and reform of planning law is also important.
Thank you. Really important question. Important question because we do have a housing crisis. Pretending that we can build on the brownfield sites that are getting fewer and fewer as a way out of this is just not realistic. We do need to build housing. We need to build the right housing in the right place, and that means a proper plan. But in terms of just locally, I was looking at the figures. 2,600 people are homeless in this area. One of the most fundamental things that we need to focus on is that a secure home is something that is an absolute right to people. So we need to end no-fault eviction. We need to make sure that the local authorities can put rent control, and that local authorities can look to bring back into use a number of buildings that can be used for existing buildings that can be used for housing, and that includes accommodation that's built and then left empty because developers are speculating on the cost.
Right, I'll try and keep it brief. 1 minute and starting. Right, first thing is standards. All buildings have to be net zero. They will result in much lower bills, which will allow people to basically contest the cost of living crisis. Land use, we've no building on green sites. End of story. We need that land for either farming or we need it for biodiversity and carbon capture. Third point is to allow local authorities to invest in housing again and encourage them to do that. They can capitalise the rents, pay for the housing, and so we end the scandal, the ridiculous scandal of affordable housing when affordable housing isn't affordable. Okay, so that's the third point. And then finally, we really need to be building upwards and repurposing old buildings that are not being used. So that way, and put them into housing. Thank you.
Actually, I agree with a lot of what Wisdom just said just then. I'm very clear. I only favour brownfield development. We have lost far too much farmland that has impacted our food security. We have lost far too much open countryside to development here in Buckinghamshire. There are the brownfield sites, predominantly in the towns in the county, in High Wycombe and in Aylesbury, where we can build the homes we need, of all tenure types: social rent, proper discount market, affordable homes to buy, and of course the full market value homes to pay for all of that out of what the developers make. But I've got to say, developers don't tend to like me, because I would imagine there are quite a lot of developers that have had developments in what was the Buckingham constituency who have my face on a dartboard, because I have consistently opposed them when they've tried to take our open countryside away, when they've tried to pull fast ones, like in Ickford, where they said that the eventuality of flooding on that development would be a once-in-a-100-year eventuality, and then suspiciously, when it flooded 7 times in 6 months, they raised the height of all those houses. Or when they try and take village greens away, like Kendrick Homes did in Alswick, I fight them, and I stop them, and I win.
Time for one last question. Just going to come from Bob Lewis, who is down the front here. If you can bring the microphone up. Bob, if you can identify yourself.
Good evening. My question concerns competence and probably the inverse incompetence that has gone on in government. So forgetting petty party politics, does the UK need a significantly more competent government? And before they blame one another, I just remind the panel that the SNP in Scotland, helped until recently by the Greens, found it difficult to be competent. In Wales, the Labour Party managed it all on its own.
You've asked the question, so I'm going
Well,
to...
I haven't. You've seen this.
Can you ask the second part of the question?
The next point is that precisely how would candidates deal with it? Those words are cheap. Getting something competently done
the question
is much more difficult.
How precisely would each candidate tackle this task? So perhaps I can start. A minute, please.
Competence in government is something that we all expect. We all have aspirations of our government to be honest and have integrity and good moral standards, but sadly it's not something we've seen a lot in local governments. I think one thing that alarms me, I've been reading all the manifestos and there's facts chucked out in there. I work in an industry that's heavily regulated. Every fact that we make about a new medical product is checked by numerous people and is analysed in great depth. We don't have that level of rigour to check anything that our politicians say. They say it one day, the next day they say something else. And I think we need an ethical system to run alongside our government and hold them to account for when they say things that are strictly untrue. Thank you.
I'm an academic, I deal with evidence. I want us to make policies on the basis of evidence. Values are important. Knowledge and expertise are also important. And I would want to listen to experts in their field what the best policy options are before I make decisions.
Yes, this question is about integrity and honesty, but it's also about the nature of government. The single first-past-the-post system of election causes these enormous swings, a huge majority on one side, a huge majority on the next. From what I can see, from what I've heard, it sounds like we're going to have a large Labour majority next time. But what we really need is other voices in Parliament who are continually checking and holding to account politicians and governments for the promises that they make in their manifesto and holding them properly to account. What you need is a broad coalition, and what we need is a different voting system.
I was at a meeting just last week at HSBC's headquarters with a group of professionals from around the country, really high-powered professionals. And the question they are asking is about climate change. If we are seeing that 1.5 degrees is happening now, and the impact is going to be energy prices rocketing, food prices going crazy, immigration going to be in the hundreds of millions, not thousands or hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions. If we're seeing this happening, and all of the businesses are saying we're dealing with this, but the governments and the politicians are not, the competency they're questioning is, are any of the politicians who don't have a plan for an industrial revolution, clean industrial revolution, and to get to net zero, are they competent? Because it's your future, it's your grandchildren, your children, and the answer is probably not. But to go back to how can we sort this out, I think you're right. Proportional representation will force dialogue rather than this stupid party political banter. You're terrible. No, you're rubbish too. That's really not on. And the other way is really to vote for people who do understand the problems that your generation and your children's generation are going to face. Vote for us.
I think the way I would answer that question is the way I've been a Member of Parliament for the last 4.5 years. And I'm attracted to the job of Member of Parliament. Not Member of Parliament for what that might lead to, but the job of representing an area, of ensuring that the voice is heard of that constituency, even when it involves stepping outside the box of my own party line, which I have done on many occasions. We talked about HS2 earlier. I stepped outside the box on the corporation tax increases, which I felt was hammering business and stopping them growing too much. There are countless examples where I have not been afraid to put constituency and country first. And that is the way I will carry on if I'm elected as your Member of Parliament on the 4th of July. Locally focused, ensuring Buckinghamshire's voice is heard. Yes, I'm a Conservative, and I'll be conservative in my approach to most things. But first and foremost, as Ronald Reagan said, don't forget to dance with the one what brung you. Keep with what the constituency wants first and foremost.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions. Oh, sorry, Charisma, I've done it to you again. Apologies.
I will bang on and on and on about this as much as probably Keir Starmer bangs on how much what his father used to do. I am not a career politician, so I don't even believe there should be a box. It should be a collection of voices for people who have actually listened to the constituents, who their representative. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to listen because, as I said, in business, in my industry, I have been working tirelessly in order to make sure that the business needs are addressed. You are the shareholders of this country, and if the country is not working for you, it's not working at all. And I believe that there is great incompetence in government, with people changing their jobs, ministers changing their jobs because they like the sound of it. No, let's get people who actually know what they're doing in front of Keir Starmer, in front of the nation, and say this is what needs to change. These are the policies that need to be in because we've listened to the people. It is about listening. We need to change the chaos of fighting and squabbling of who's getting what piece of the pie, and we actually need to listen to the people and feed from the grassroots up and make policies for you, the shareholders, rather than career politicians wondering what they can do next in order to increase their wallet.
Okay, that concludes the questions. We're going to ask each of the candidates to sum up in 1 minute, and I will be timing you all, and I will be guillotining you if you go on for more than a minute. So you need to, each of you, to remind our audience why they should vote for you on the 4th of July, and we're going to go in reverse order compared to the beginning. So, Greg Smith, Conservative, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been a Member of Parliament the last 4.5 years. I know how the system works. I get my elbows out for Buckinghamshire. I fight for this, which is my home as well as all of your home. I have lived here in Wendover before. I still live in the constituency. I use the same services as everybody else. I look at this constituency through the same eyes that you do. I will come at this in the same way I have the last 4.5 years, putting the constituency first, putting the country first, and arguing for those things that I think we all want to see. An end to HS2 or making them behave. Lower taxes for everyone, keeping our economy growing so that we can fund the public services that we all want to excel.
The consequence of... Hello, can you hear? Great. The consequence of not reaching net zero, net by 2030, are dire beyond anybody's imagination. So we have a chance though, we have a threat, but we also have an opportunity. So we need to have a clean green industrial plan, and the Climate Party have that plan to boost the UK's economy, perhaps even double it, bringing in tax revenues to pay for services, jobs, for benefits for the NHS, basically to safeguard the future of your children and your grandchildren. And the Climate Party, you might say, are the only competent party able to deal with that, because we're the only ones with that plan. So I would say please vote for the Climate Party.
And I would say that we need Green MPs in Parliament, and we need a very strong Green vote right across the country, because climate change is the biggest issue that's facing humankind. It's not a choice that we can choose to ignore. It's right in front of us. And unless we face up to this challenge, we're going to just kick the problem down the line, and it will be our children and our grandchildren that will be faced with an even greater problem. Now, all the others will tell you that it's costly and we can't afford it. We are a very wealthy society. We're just a bit badly organised at the moment, and we can face up to this challenge if we just come together to do it. The Green Party doesn't really sit on the political spectrum. When you're heading towards an iceberg, calling for the engines to slow down isn't a left-wing or a right-wing shout. It's just common sense.
If I'm elected as your next MP, I promise you that I will work hard every day for every one of you to the very best of my ability. You will have my passion for social justice, my passion for education, for nature, for climate action, for health. You will also have my head that is used to looking at things critically, analytically, and you will have my organizational abilities, my experience in working as teams, working across divides and with lots of different peoples to find solutions. We need a strong Liberal Democrat force in the next Parliament, and here's your opportunity to elect one of them.
I think our strapline speaks for itself: family, community, nation. We're the only party that really wants to start building society from the bottom up. Locally, I think I could make a big impact for this community because the science coupled with project management means I'm not the sort of politician who would stand there and pose for photos and cut ribbons. I really want to make a difference, and I think I have the skills to do that. Thank you.
This is a change election, and it's time to stop the chaos. And if you keep voting for the same thing over and over again, you'll get the same result. So it's about time we make change. As I'm standing here before you, not as a career politician, as somebody who has gone through the same chaos that you have, the same person that's gone through the same trials and tribulations that you have, someone who is actually here to represent you and not for my own personal gain. I am in the sight of service to the people of this constituency, because you are the same as my mother, my brother, my sister, my cousins, my aunts and my uncles. The only way we get change is by changing the people who are in government, the people who stand for us, the people who want the same things as we do. And I am that person. But I'm not so averse that I am not to listen to you. I'm here with my 2 ears and my 1 mouth. The 2 ears to listen to you and the 1 mouth to make sure Westminster hears Mid Buckinghamshire.
Thank you. Before we go, I should have told you that this was being live streamed and recorded, so I'm telling you now. I should have told you at the beginning. But it is all we have time for, and thank you to everybody. Many thanks to our candidates for coming, and the best of luck to all of them on the 4th of July, and thank you for being a great audience. Good night.